Jennifer, welcome to Women Finding Clarity.
Thank you for such a warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here and to connect with you for this chat today.
I'm super excited to have you here because I really love everything that you're about. It's a lot of what I talk with my clients about. And you just seem like you go really deep. And by deep, I mean like really expansive
Yeah.
with your people. Yeah, so let's just kind of get into it. When you're talking about your inner power, what does that mean to you? And how do you feel like women can tap into their own?
Yeah, when I feel into inner power, what really comes forward is truth, living embodied in our truth. And that's something that I speak about quite often, pretty much in all contexts, working with clients, just talking with other people in my day-to-day life, it's like I tend to attract a lot of people on my path who know that they're being called to something bigger, but that inner power, even living embodied in your truth, really even it transcends purpose and mission, right? It goes even further beyond that. It's really getting acutely tuned into that crystal clear sense of who you are and what you were born here to do and living in devotion to that as a day-to-day embodiment, right? Like a day-to-day way of being. So anyways, that's what comes forward when you say inner power.
Well, I feel like you are the embodiment of that for yourself because you started the conversation by saying, this is what I talk about with my clients in my day to day life. And like, you are a great example of embodying your truth.
Yeah, thank you. I received that.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you feel like, as we're kind of just getting into this idea of embodying your truth? Let's just talk a little bit for a minute about what's involved in that. And when we say your personal power, your inner truth, how do we figure out what that is?
Yeah. Well, I would say first off that there is a call that one is feeling, a desire, you could say, to go deeper with yourself, to rediscover yourself and or, to evolve on your journey. That's really where it starts off at. And something that is the focus also of a lot of my conversations and content that I share is around transcending constructs because we come here with like this amnesia or this veil of forgetfulness. And our whole entire journey here is remembering the truth of who we are and living embodied in that it's coming back to ourselves. And that's really how I define healing as well. It's not when I talk about healing, it's not in the context of being broken or having a problem. It's in the context of coming back to you, returning to you, remembering you and the truth of who you are, and also, why you're here. Because every one of us that is here in this time, right now, we're as a collective experiencing a great revolution, really, of transformation and releasing these constructs that have promoted fear and negativity and conformity and really moving into a higher consciousness way of being and living. So to really I could go off on a tangent and talk about this, like, it's like I can go so expansive, I can go so deep, right? But to say I want to kind of rein it back in a little bit because I love going so deep, but to say very simply, when it comes to that desire to live more authentically in the truth of who you are is just starting out by taking a look at, really tuning in and being honest with yourself about who you are and how does that align with the way that you're living your life now, right? Really
Mhm.
looking at all the major areas of your life. So, health, money, relationships, um, your career, your purpose or your mission, like whatever that higher calling is for you, and is how does how you're showing up in the world, right, align with the truth of who you are, and then basically just prioritizing from there, right, getting honest with yourself about what needs to change. And that's an important point, I believe, to touch on as well, because we love to say, I know that, right? Or like you may intellectually understand something. That's not the question. The question is, how are you embodying what you intellectually understand? That's really where the missing link is a lot of the time, and we live in this age of information, and so it's so easy to fall into the trap of, well, I know that, you know uh and mistake intellectually understanding something for having taken action, and it's not the same.
It's not the same. And, at the beginning of when you just started talking about this, you said, I can't even remember exactly the words, but what came to mind is that we are, instead of healing as in fixing, you said, because we're not broken,
Right.
we are unlearning, right? These constructs that we've been taught by society, by culture, by familial traditions and values and things. We're unlearning so we can embody the truth of who we really are. And I love
Yes.
that so much.
Yeah, and I love that you just said we're unlearning so we can embody the truth of who we are, right? Because we have to be willing to create space to anchor into our bodies the truth of who we are. So there is that journey of releasing, right, what is not in alignment with us from a frequency perspective.
And so it's almost like that's step one,
Mhm.
is releasing, so it creates the space so we can do the deeper work, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, actually, so even I would go one step further back and to say, really, the first step is, I mentioned this earlier, is that you have a desire for more, right? A desire to go deeper with yourself, to reveal more of the truth of who you are and live as such. So the first step is giving yourself permission to lean into, what kind of life do you want, right? What kind of life do you want? And what kind of vision do you have for the world? And being really honest with yourself about what that vision is, what you really desire, not what you think you should desire, right? Because even within that, you can get stuck in this mind construct of, oh, well, what's safe for me to envision, right? So there's an element of really giving yourself permission to do the trust fall with yourself to envision that, and then it's what you said, right? Moving on to peeling back the layers
Yeah.
to bring yourself
So,
into alignment with that vision.
yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people would not call themselves visionaries. And so, to me, what it sounds like you do is you create a safe space where they can start to
Yes.
vision. And so they can become more visionary.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, as you're helping people become visionaries and really embody the truth of who they are, what have you found are some of the biggest obstacles that really prevent women from stepping into their truth?
Yeah, there are a lot of I mean, I'm find myself circling back to what we were saying earlier about constructs. It's transcending constructs. That's
Yeah.
exactly what it is. Because the thing is the culture, the familial ancestral dynamics, the societal structures have all, for the most part, promoted conformity, promoted judgment and fear and negativity, and that success, and that even being loved has to be put into a box, and if you don't do it this way, then it's not happening. And that is quite literally the direct opposite of the truth of who we are at a soul level as these amazing divine creator beings, right? It's not about fitting into any kind of label or any kind of box. It's about allowing the real truth of who you are to come forward and be expressed through your body. So that would be the number one thing, right? Is letting go, having the willingness to let go of those constructs. And some of them can be very deep. We can have very deep core wounding that makes it feel difficult for us to release those constructs. And so that's part of the work that I do with clients as well. I mean, I'm really a not beyond a spiritual mentor. I'm also a channel and a multidimensional healer. So I also do a lot of frequency healing work and sometimes channeled guidance with clients as well to aid them in really getting into the deep root of what is causing them to feel that difficulty in releasing what they know at an intellectual level that they need to let go of. Because we are these amazing multidimensional beings, right? Like we're literally, I love talking about this because we are quite literally the cosmos walking around in a human body. We really are. You're beyond your cells and atoms into your electrons, um, our electrons are like these multidimensional gateways into other aspects of us.
Yeah.
And when you can connect with yourself in that way, I mean, that's where you step into the quantum field. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah. I love that you just said that about the quantum field, and because it can feel like magic, right? So
Yeah.
there is a lot of talk about manifestation, but what do you think people misunderstand about manifestation?
Yeah. The biggest misunderstanding around manifestation is that in many teaching environments in the personal development industry and in some spiritual circles too, it's taught from a mental space. So, like, people are being taught the steps to manifesting, right? And they're like, okay, they're in their head on what are the steps I need to follow? Set your intention. I need to feel good. I need to do all this. Listen, none of that's coming from your body. None of that's coming from your heart. It's coming from your mind, and the mind serves a purpose, but it is not the singular space from with which we create like it is portrayed to be in the society that we've been living in, right? So that is the number one misunderstanding with manifesting.
Mm, I agree with you completely. Everything is about getting out of your head and into your body.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, with this idea of multidimensional healing, how do you incorporate that into your work? And how does that, how do women use that energy healing to break through their personal limitations?
Yeah. So frequency healing is most beneficial when someone is in a space of willingness, right? So you may not have the answer or feel like you have the answer or feel like you even have clarity on your path, and that quite frankly doesn't matter. What matters is that you're willing, is that and I often speak also on two of the greatest qualities that you can embody on this journey are those of curiosity and humility. So if you can cultivate being curious about your journey, right? So instead of viewing your experiences as a problem to solve, reframe that as instead a skill to attain, right? And then humility with that, right? Being humble and knowing that you are this extremely important tiny grain of sand in this vast, limitless cosmos of potential, right? Knowing that you're just as important as the collective in yourself, but also at the same time being open to knowing there's so much that you don't know, right? There's so much that you haven't experienced. When you can cultivate those two qualities of curiosity and humility, I mean, wow, you don't need to have any of the other answers because the entire world's going to open for you, right? And so that's when you're in a space to benefit at the highest level from working more with frequency healing, because we could have one session together and your entire life would change because you're letting go of the resistance, right, to opening yourself up down to that, beyond even that cellular level. And we can get to what often the root causes is in the subconscious, right? Where all of those wounds are residing, and do some energy work and move them. And sometimes, we work with guides, but really I just work with the highest frequency of Christ consciousness, the highest frequencies of light, direct from source, creator, uh, and that's how we work. And change can happen really fast when you're willing. If you can just be in a space when you're willing, you don't have to have all the answers. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And for people who aren't necessarily familiar with levels of energy and all of that, I just want you to consider the feeling that you get from, say, heavy metal music versus the feeling that you get from pure love, like the love you feel looking at your brand new baby, right? And so heavy metal music actually carries a very low frequency, a very low vibration energetically. Love is like the highest form. It's
yeah,
the highest frequency. And so, you don't have to be an energy healer. You don't have to be a quantum physicist to understand when you really think of it in perspective of real life examples that are easily accessible, right?
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I love that you bring this up, the feeling into it, because that's the key to embodiment, is allowing yourself to feel. And uh and love, I'm also glad that you bring that up, because what often happens on this journey of remembering is that we have to revisit our relationship to love. How do we feel about it? How do we define it? Even because we often have to redefine our relationship to love, because especially if you've experienced some kind of trauma or you've been in unhealthy codependent dynamics, how your perspective of love could be one that is fear-based, right? So really understanding that, and an author, a channel that I recommend that actually puts into very simple perspective the scale of those emotions is Abraham Hicks. And
Mm.
many years ago, like it's been a long time at this point, but that was one of the very first books when I was initially like on this intentional, I would say, journey of rediscovery, right? That was one of the first books. And I remember the first time I ever read this book, because there's actually several books. I want to correct myself there, but the book that I read was Ask and It Is Given. And I remember the first time I read this book, and it was talking about vibration and energy and this scale of emotions, right? And how to navigate your way up into higher frequencies. My mind was blown, like in the best way. So, if anyone feels like they're kind of just getting started out with that, like that's a fantastic, fantastic book.
Such a great recommendation. I love Abraham. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So, part of that embodiment and part of that when we're first starting out is using your intuition
yeah.
and, your sixth sense, really. You're knowing. And so, how can women strengthen their intuition so they can trust themselves more deeply in their daily lives?
Yeah, the first step to that is really starting with the realization or the knowing, right, that we have two voices essentially. One is the ego, which is the mind, right, the human mind, okay, and then there's our intuition, our soul's guidance, and a way that God source also speaks through us, and understanding the difference between those two voices. That's the first step, right? Understanding that your ego, your human mind is always going to be the voice that questions you, that challenges you, and that produces negative and fear based thoughts, right? Your intuition, your soul's guidance is always going to be, it's always going to feel often neutral in nature, right? And it's always going to guide you in a direction of growth and expansion. And it often comes across in a much more subtle way than the ego mind does, right? And some people speak in the context of the ego mind. I feel like this is important to say. Some people speak in the context of the ego mind as something that is to be poo pooed, or like it's bad or whatever. And it's not at all. Our human mind serves a great, amazing purpose. It just isn't the star of the show, which is how people often treat it, right? It's more of a supporting role. Oh, it's more of a supporting role, um, to your soul's guidance, right? Which has essentially this bigger picture of what you're here to do, what your purpose is, what your mission is. The human mind is also limited to your experiences in this current incarnation. So that's why, okay, very simply, that's why you don't want to make all your decisions from this mental space, because it's only
Yeah.
going to be able to give you the best advice based upon whatever your past experiences have been and environmental, societal conditioning, right? So that's very simply like the first step that you want to look at and understand, and then it becomes a matter of, okay, well, we know how the ego mind works, the fear, the questioning, and all of that. Uh, how do I know how my intuition's speaking to me? That is different for all of us. And if you want, I will be happy to go into the most common clairs.
Sure. Yeah. Do a little because we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about it, right? And I think it's important for people to understand and to really start to relate to how their intuition shows up for them best.
Yeah, absolutely. So, to go a little bit further into this, as I said, the way that our intuition speaks to us is unique to each one of us. Our gifts are different. And so there are some common clairs, right? And clair just means clear. So you may have a gift of clairsentience, right? Which just means clear feeling, and that could mean that you get the goosebumps. You might be an empath, right? You're very sensitive to other beings' energies and sensitive to your environment. You may physically feel your head tingling or some kind of like validation giving you that sign that this is validation for you, right? That's clairsentience. There's also clairvoyance, which is clear seeing. And you may see something in the physical, which doesn't happen kind of quite as often. Because I mean, spiritual energies, like it does happen, but our physical reality is a much denser vibration, right? So clairvoyance, you'll likely see in your mind's eye, right? You might get a vision of something or visualize something. Then there is clairaudience, which is clear hearing, and that one isn't as common, but what often happens is you may hear something, and no one's around. You might hear the sound of someone's voice who's familiar to you, in your mind, or the sound of a voice that isn't yours, and no one is around. That would be an example of clairaudience. It could be a guide speaking with you, it could be God speaking with you. Then there is claircognizance, which is clear knowing. And this is when you just know something. You can't explain how you know it or if you learned it or how the information came to be. You just know. And this information always feels neutral, right? And that's another way that you know that it's not your your human mind or your ego mind creating something, because when it comes to tuning into your intuitive gifts and how that voice speaks to you, a lot of people struggle with, well, how can I trust the information I'm receiving? Am I making this up? And to everyone who's listening right now, I can unequivocally tell you, you are not making it up, okay? You're
I
not.
feel like that's the most common when you're
Yeah,
first starting out. It's the most common. I feel like I know this, but am I just making it up? Am I just when I took mediumship training, that was one of the first things is like did I actually see this in my mind's eye or am I just making it up to fit a story or, am
yeah,
I just creating a story even?
exactly. And so that's the number one thing, right? It's learning to trust, and that is another element of societal conditioning and programming, right? Is that we aren't to trust or to even be trusted, right? So our relationship to trust is also another tremendous component on our journey to be explored and transmuted. And yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of trust. But yeah, I teach about this all the time. I have taught people from more of the basic components that we're talking about now and into more advanced, tuning into their soul gifts and becoming a clearer channel, both for their highest self, their intuitive self, and also to connect with God and other high frequency beings, right? So, and I want to say as well is that, every one of us is a channel. Every one of us has the ability to cultivate our own unique advanced healing technologies. And that's something very important I want to put emphasis around, because we're living in a time where if you're here and especially if you're listening this conversation right now, it's highly likely that you're meant to birth something new and unique into the world that contributes to the higher frequency direction we're rising into as a collective. So it's really important, that if you feel called to receive someone's training or certification, absolutely follow that intuitive nudge and know that you have something to offer, something to remember, something to bring forward from within you to contribute. And that's really what I do. Going back to living embodied in your truth, is I support people in bringing forward that truth and bringing forward all of them.
Mm, so good. So good. So, kind of as we're coming to an end, and with that in mind of how you do work with people, is there anything that you'd like to offer listeners?
Yes, I have this amazing guided meditative journey called Highest Destiny. And I'm sure we'll have the link in the show notes. It's also on my website too, which is jenniferspor.com. That's JENNIFERSPOR for those who are listening audibly. But it's about a like 28 or 30-minute long journey. And it was originally channeled through the Akashic Records, and it takes you on a journey into the temple of your highest self. So, into your soul, your intuitive self, right? And it brings you on this journey to gain clarity around your highest destiny in this life. So, if you're someone who is feeling that call, right, to learn more, to evolve more, to remember more, this journey is perfect for you. I've had lots of positive feedback from people who have listened to it, sharing that every time that they listen to it multiple times, and every time they do, they receive new insights. So, yes, absolutely. It's my honor to share that, and I invite everyone to listen to it.
That's very generous. That's a lengthy download that you're sharing. And so that really is generous. And the link to that is in show notes. And Jennifer, as we're kind of coming to an end, if you could share one powerful message with women who are really in the process of awakening to and embodying their inner truth, what would that be?
Yeah. It's interesting because there's this favorite quote that I have that comes up often. And it comes up often because it really just captures the feeling that we've been talking about so well, which is a quote by Joan of Arc that says, where she says, I am not afraid. I was born to do this. So you can feel the energy of those words, right? And you can feel how fortified she was in her truth. And that is the goal of this life right now, is to become that fortified in your foundation, in your body, in your truth. And so that's what I'll leave everyone with.
I love it. And I didn't know that quote. So thank you, because I'm taking that one and running with it because it is fortifying. It immediately props me up and makes me feel more confident in everything that I'm doing.
Yeah, Joan of Arc is amazing. Yes.
Yeah. Wonderful to have you here, Jennifer. And I hope that our conversations continue.
Thank you. It was truly an honor. Thanks so much.